Okay, I think we'll make a start. So, hello everybody, thank you for joining us for Tech Wednesday this evening. I'm going to wish you all a very happy St. Patrick's Day. I've worn my green shirt this evening to honour the occasion. So yes, wishing you all a very happy St. Patrick's Day if you are celebrating. Before we get started tonight, I also just want to do another celebration. We were just chatting beforehand that it's actually our 1 year anniversary of Virtual Tech Wednesday. So just really a celebration, and thank you all ever so much for sticking with us along this journey. This time, last year in March, we were all complete virtual novices, and we just took a punt, tried it out, and luckily a few technical issues, but luckily it worked well, and it's great to have you still here with us 1 year on. Hopefully not much longer on virtual anyway. So Tech Wednesday, as most of you know, is our monthly meetup. We're based here in the West Midlands, but whilst we are virtual, we're opening up our meetup to the wider UK. We're joined this evening by some of our colleagues up in the Leeds Bruntwood building, so it's great to have those with us this evening. Throughout the evening, if you'd like to continue the conversation online, please do. We encourage you to use the hashtag TechWeds to keep it all together, and obviously include the @TechWednesday and @Bruntwood_SciTech so that we can notice them and keep the conversation going. You'll see that we've got a lovely lineup this evening. We've got 3 lovely speakers here with me. So I'm joined by Paul Brewer from Shropshire 3D Print. So Paul will shortly be talking to us about the 3D printing industry, around how he started up his business and also running his printing business, and also how the last 12 months has impacted his business, the ways in which he's had to adapt, which I'm sure many of us have had to, and will understand those points that Paul will cover in his talk. I'm also joined by Virginia Driver and Tom Woodhouse from Page White and Farrer. Some of you may recognise Virginia. So Virginia joined us last April. So we've come a full circle, and she's rejoining us again, and she's brought Tom along this evening, which we're really grateful for. So Tom and Virginia are both European patent attorneys and intellectual property experts. Their talk this morning, gosh, I'm losing it. Their talk this evening will talk about the fact that it is risky to rely on copyright and trade secrets for protection, and also cover how to safeguard your innovation, and that a good patent and strong IP strategy will help you do so. So this evening, we'll obviously hear from the amazing speakers. You'll also have your opportunity to ask any questions. So we will have 2 Q&A sessions, one with each of the speakers. And then we'll just cover some upcoming opportunities and events that are happening in the coming weeks. Hopefully we'll wrap up around 6:30, and then we're free to go. So I won't take up much more time of that, because I know the guys are really keen to get going, and we were just discussing how long the talks are. So yes, enough from me. Paul, if I would pass over to you first, and you'd like to share your screen and talk to us all about Shropshire 3D printing.
Hi everyone, happy Paddy's Day. I've got my green waistcoat on and my Guinness ready for when Virginia and Tom come on to speak. I'm the Managing Director of Shropshire 3D Print. We're a 3D print supplier, and I'll tell you a little more about the business and some good hints and tips going forward. I started the business 6 years ago, 2014, set up the business with a grant to purchase a demonstrator, and I joined the industry when it was actually quite mature. Some of you attending tonight might be a bit shocked to learn that 3D printing was invented way back in 1984, and what you may be experiencing, if you think it's new, is the fact that when the patents for 3D printers were being released, many newcomers came to the market. Those newcomers were Kickstarters, they were new manufacturers, they were manufacturers who were looking for new ways to do things. Now, 3D printing isn't just one technology. I specialize in fused deposition modeling 3D printers, that is FDM or FFF, it's usually called. But there are many, many different technologies in 3D printing. But when I started the business, I had a clear channel, and that channel was counter to what was happening when I was joining the industry. What was happening when I was joining the industry is there was this plethora of interest in 3D printing and many newcomers to the market. But I chose my channel to market to be business to business or business to education. And I started a transactional website. Never expected to sell a 3D printer online, and in fact I hadn't. And the average order value of the first 5 years of trading was £135. But that last year changed dramatically, and it changed for a few reasons. I've seen a 50% increase in the sales online, of the average order value, that is. And that's just within the 12-month period, taking the average order value for the last 6 years. So I'm going to talk about why that's happened and how the pandemic hit me. My company is Shropshire 3D Print. We make futures reality. My two channels to market being education, and you can see the education printers at the bottom there, the Sketch Classroom on the left, and then on the right of the screen you'll see the Replicator Plus, the Method platforms, including the carbon fiber editions and the Z18. And I do make futures reality for businesses who want to get their product to market faster than the competition, and for students in education who are trying to make their futures reality as well. Whoops. 6 years ago, the desktop market was radically different than you see today. And what you see on the screen there is the Darwin. And in the UK, the RepRap movement came into being, and this release of all patents spawned a massive influx into the market. People like MakerBot and Ultimaker, one tends to forget, launched to market with a very different channel, with an aspiration to get a 3D printer on every desk in every home, much as we have a 2D printer, a paper printer today. However, what the race to market there went 6 years ago was not only a liberalization of 3D printing and getting 3D printing out to the masses, it was a chase, I would say, to the bottom on price, which was not good for the market or anyone trying to make a business out of the market. However, there was a change in the situation, and that is that this liberalization reduced the barriers for schools on price for 3D printing, but I still see lots of barriers still in place with education, and that's because educators are driven by the wrong sorts of measurements. Ofcom results and school performance tables don't necessarily help when it comes to 3D printing and getting students exposed to 3D printers. The government did try to intervene just before I came into the industry. In October 2013, they introduced a paper really promoting the idea that 3D printing within teaching STEM, that's science, technology, engineering and mathematics in education, that 3D printing would have a useful part in that. Also in 2013, MakerBot, whose aspirations towards the liberalization of 3D printing across the Western world, was also swallowed by one of the major players in the industry, Stratasys. I think you saw on that first slide, the two major players in the industry were actually Stratasys and 3D Systems. And what Stratasys did was they incorporated MakerBot 3D printers into their business by being the introduction, the price-led introduction to the industrial market, whereas they had most of the market already tied up. So what the MakerBot line does is feed into the Stratasys market. and that join in the middle is certainly still joined with the Z18, the replicator Z18, but also other models within the range, which we'll talk about later. 3D print is exciting because for businesses, it certainly gets them to market 30% faster than the competition in terms of prototyping. And that design to product process is what 3D printing can accelerate for them. But what we've seen, and we certainly saw there's an example of this last year with 3D printing in general, 3D printing makes the supply chain more agile and more flexible. And what I saw at the outbreak of the pandemic was lots of companies stopping production on what they normally did because the market wasn't there, and turning their 3D printers into production of PPE for the NHS. And certainly, I'll talk about this in a bit more detail, I saw a boom in 3D printing in that way. The industry back in 2015 dominated by the early adopters like the automotive industry, and it was also dominated by the fact that industry was using 3D printing at that time for prototyping only. 90% of the items made on 3D printers in industry were for prototyping. That has changed radically since 2015, but what we've also seen is that the auto manufacturers are moving to end-use parts. I'll give you an example of that. You can take two industry recognizable names in automotive, Rolls-Royce and Daihatsu, and they have offered their clients the ability to customize and personalize their car. So they'll go into a showroom, choose a car and say, well, I actually want a different dam on the front. I want the handles slightly different or whatever. And those manufacturers are offering personalization for their clients. I've always worked in a home office, never saw any change during the start of the pandemic to what I did. So I didn't see any change to what I did with the pandemic. What I did see is a change to how I approach the business. Now, every business when it starts needs two documents, which I'll come back to. It needs a cash flow forecast and it needs a business plan. And that business plan needs to include every resource you might need, and those resources and skill sets which might be needed to deliver the end product. I didn't, by the way, ever over the last 5 years neglect my own self-improvement. I was also always keen to fill the gaps in my knowledge so that I could actually deliver. So I also went back to school in 2019 to Aston Business School, and I would recommend that highly. That's your neighbours down there in Tech Wednesday, Bruntwood. Yeah, 2016. Since 2016, Aston Business School has seen nearly 200 jobs created and over £1 million added to contributed to the UK economy. Thoroughly recommend revisiting if you are a business, starting a business, or you're an existing business owner, to re-educate yourself in terms of growth and look at the things that are important to your business. Moving on. There we are. So at the outbreak of the pandemic and the 2020 3D Hubs produced this report. So the growth opportunities were still there, but we had this huge intervening force, the pandemic. So I couldn't expect that this prediction would come true, and I had to decide, well, what was I going to do with the business? How was I going to go forward? In terms of the pandemic, I can, if you can relate this to any other business, if you were a playground manufacturer, so you manufactured swings and slides, and a government that came in and said, look, we're not happy with the amount of people breaking their legs, children breaking their legs in these council-run playgrounds, we're banning them. Your market would go, you'd have to do something about it. So you have to come back to those two very important documents that you started out with, which are living documents, your cash flow forecast and your business plan, and decide how you're going to change, what you're going to do differently to win back some market and carry on existing. The effects of the pandemic were multiple to my business. I suddenly had the inability to exhibit, which is one way of attracting new customers to our industry, or to demonstrate, which is when somebody is interested and wants to actually buy. Now, the buying cycle used to be, before the pandemic, certainly 2019, if somebody was interested, they could take 6 months to purchase, because they'd want everyone that was involved in the process and the organization to have a say, to have a look at the machine and to see it working and understand how it would integrate into their business. But coming into the pandemic, the people I were talking to on the business side and on the professional side of the business, many of the corporates were furloughed, and I wasn't able to carry on conversations that I was quite into in terms of the buying cycle, and that was frightening. But I also had the inability to add on any value to any sales made with regards 3D printer hardware, and that is installation software training, because customers couldn't see me anymore. I couldn't enter their premises, so I had to think about how I was going to deliver that. But customers started to change their behavior in terms of they no longer saw the need to have a demonstration, and the customers' buying cycle and buying habits changed radically. There was, as I said at the outset, for PPE, a massive increase in parts sales to revive 3D printers that weren't perhaps working at the time of the outbreak. And there was a massive increase in consumables, but there was a massive decrease in the timeline between inquiry and purchase on hardware, which was encouraging, to say the least. But prior to the pandemic, I'd never ever sold any hardware online, and that did change last year. When a business is hit with a problem, I explained about the playground equipment manufacturer and ourselves, you have to pivot your business. You have to look at, well, what am I going to do to survive? I can decrease prices, and that might affect my sales, but it will also affect my profitability, and therefore, am I going to hit the thing you should always know in business? What is your break-even point? What expenses do you have to cover, regardless of whether you open a door or see a customer? So I had to look at whether I was going to change the customer channel, change the product lineup, whether I could change pricing, whether that would have a negative effect on my future sales, and ensure whether customers could actually come to me and buy more easily. So I upgraded the website. I changed to Magento 2 platform. I made the site more secure, and customers could buy with confidence on that they needed. I also, looking at the market that was still there, that never went away. A lot of people forget that educators were still working all the way through. The schools were open for key workers. Teachers were teaching from home, and they were teaching students who were working from home. So working in the STEM market, being a STEM ambassador, I understood this market. It was a good bolt-on to the products that we already sold within the fourth industrial revolution, the 3D printers. So robotics, electronics lines we added to the website straight away, and that began to make an impact because schools were still available to talk to introduce the product to, whereas industry wasn't. On the pricing side, MakerBot did two things. They introduced new products and introduced new software. This answered my question, and it answered my prayers, really. So this software that they introduced it could have been invented for the pandemic, but just take the education market, which was still there. They introduced this app, cloud-based app called CloudPrint, and it's a way of managing 3D printed files ready from CAD systems through a fleet of 3D printers, and what is ready to print, what is queued to print to a printer, and what has been printed. So imagine just being able to send out one link to a classroom with 30 students, get 30 files back, check what is available to print on within the fleet, and send them to the printer. And those educators were sat at home, 30 students sat in 30 different houses, and equipment in a school somewhere else. This software was and is a game changer, but it works for the designer and the engineer who's also in separate buildings and not able to actually work together throughout lockdown and pandemic. What else did MakerBot do? They launched a product for the education market, the Sketch Classroom, and that's a dual printer setup which suits what schools do. So that combined with the software, it was a no-brainer for schools, and I started to see really good sales on that product for schools. But what they also did was enhance the product they already had out. They launched a platform called Method in 2018, which printed PLA, tough nylon, and PETG, has a 60-degree heated chamber. It is an industrial product. In 2019, they launched the Method X, which has a 110-degree heated chamber, and that could print ABS, ASA, PCABS, and PCABS-FR. But in the pandemic, they launched a nylon carbon fiber edition that could print nylon carbon fiber 6.6 or nylon carbon fiber 12, depending on whether you wanted heat resistance or higher strength. That also boosted the market to be able to introduce new products to the market at that time. But they also, having closed down their open source idea from the purchase of MakerBot Strategies, opened it back up again and made other materials available. So the return on investment for anyone adopting 3D printing, being able to print a plethora of materials on the platform, was a godsend. And then they did something on price that I was hardly daring to do. They introduced a support program, 25% off the entire Method range. That's 4 different 3D printers. So if you look on screen there, take the basic Method reduced from £4,539 rather to £3,511. And that 25% reduction in price means that the barriers for those wanting to invest and keep the supply chain going was removed. But if you combine that with things like, and it's on screen there, if anybody is interested, we can copy that link and send it to them. The small equipment grant available from the Marches Growth Hub, that's Herefordshire, Gloucestershire, Shropshire, etc., is a grant up to £10,000 with 50% grant. So that method now becomes £1,700. It's ridiculous, you know. So there's never been a better time to invest. So what I've seen is an 80% growth in my business over the past 12 months. And that's down to me taking action, consolidating my business, having a look at those 2 live documents and refocusing what I do. So that's me, Paul Brewer, Shropshire 3D Print. If you've got any questions, I'll be glad to hear them.
Amazing, thank you ever so much. I'll give you a round of applause for that. Yes, please do pop your questions in the chat box or in the Q&A facility. Thank you ever so much for that, Paul. You know, like I said at the beginning, we've all kind of had to find new ways of thinking. You're very fortunate that, you know, it's worked in your favour. As the tech industry, we've come out quite well in this. So yeah, amazing. Okay, I'll kick off with a question. Is what excites you the most about this 3D printing world? You know, we've all seen over the last 12 months of the amazing things that people are being able to do with it, with the PPE. What's the thing that excites you the most?
No two clients are the same. So I have supplied GE Aviation and ASOS. So understanding what they want to achieve with the same machine perhaps is, and advising whether it will or won't meet their requirements is always, it keeps it fresh for me. It's that's exciting. It's a fast moving world. There are about 20 different technologies in 3D printing, and I only specialize in one of them. So it's a fast moving market, but it's a market that newcomers are coming to all the time. Sometimes I think it's a Groundhog Day, but most of the time, I really enjoy opening up the world of 3D printing to new adopters.
Yeah, and I think with all this work that, you know, they're doing in schools now, I think that's definitely going to be the case, isn't it? You know, the youth coming up, they're more involved with it. I didn't have it when I was at school. You know, it's a new world, and it's kind of something that they can incorporate into their education. It's brilliant.
Well, I will say, with regards to design and engineering, there is a skills gap in engineering, and that skills gap is it's all grey hair and no hair in engineering. There's an issue, and that issue is that recruitment agencies are poaching from one company to sell to the other, and driving the wages up of the design engineer. That skills gap could be and should be covered by introducing more students to the idea of design and engineering, which is in a clean environment. And if you say, Stephanie, you weren't exposed to 3D printing, if you had been and you have a creative mind, design engineering might have been for you, and we wouldn't have a skills gap in the next 5-10 years. And that's a crisis we've got to overcome.
Mm. How do you think people can aid that skills gap? What is it that, you know, people who are on the call here obviously have all an interest in technology? How do you think that we can help build that and get those into those roles?
You can do what I'm doing. I'm involved in STEM education, so I've already, this last year, despite lockdown, I've donated in inverted commas 100 hours to STEM education. So I'm still reaching out to students. I'm exposing them to the technology where perhaps the schools haven't invested, and that can only be a good thing. And in any industry that wants new employees to come on stream in their industry, they should be collaborating with education. So that's very important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that we at Bruntwood SciTech, you know, encourage. We work with a lot of the local universities, Aston, as you mentioned in yours, but also a lot of apprenticeship schemes, you know, in the local area that are aiding that skills gap.
Well, I would also say the fixation on university graduate placements. There is a balance to be struck, and we should reintroduce a pride, as the Germans do, that an engineer is as important as a doctor, and the pathway through apprenticeships is as valid as anything else to those industries.
Absolutely. Okay, question coming in here. So we've had a few comments there just thanking you for your presentation and that it was really interesting and positive. So that's brilliant. Question from Gabrielle. What promotional strategies have you considered when launching your business, and how do you market your business now? Which tactics do you consider to be most effective for the 3D printing business?
Well, the tried and tested tactic of exhibiting to attract new customers and exposing them to the product is still valid. And next week I'm exhibiting virtually at the West Midlands exhibition, the West Midlands Expo. So that's still a valid way of attracting new customers. I think every bit of advertising you do, I think there's a well-known adage that you can stop whichever form of advertising and marketing that you don't think works for you, as long as you can prove it's not working. And you don't know which bit actually doesn't work at the end of the day, because the customer doesn't necessarily say, do you know what, I was exposed to your name coming across my Facebook or my Twitter feed, and I was interested in 3D printing, and that's why I ended up at the exhibition, and that's why I've booked a demonstration. The customer doesn't generally tell you that story, and you don't generally get into it. So you need to do everything. And what you do on social media and what you do in email marketing and everything you do needs to drive the customer through your sales portals. So that needs to attract them onto the website. The website doesn't necessarily need to be transactional, but it needs to be where the customer can start making the decision-making process and gather the information they need. And the more information you provide for free, the better. The more of a closed window you've got with a nose pressed up against it, that you can't have those goodies because we're shut, is not a good idea. You must give as much information as possible out across all the channels.
Lovely. And then another question coming from Pete. I think we'll make this one our last question. What does Paul see as the future of 3D printing market for him?
The future of the 3D printing market is, well, I'll answer that another way. I think the future of 3D printing is massively exciting because it's taken us beyond our world. In the ISS in 2014 had a mission on board, and there was a company that designed a 3D printer to work in low gravitation. That was called Made in Space. They'd sent a 3D printer up to the ISS, and they had a mission, but it was just an exercise. They had something to do which was life critical, and they had to have a particular tool to do a job. The Americans would call it a wrench, we'd call it a spanner. And they would say, right, you need to take this nut off this bolt and release the pressure on X, Y, whatever it was. And the signal came back from the ISS, we don't have that spanner on board. We do not have that wrench. They were sent a file, they 3D printed that wrench, and they completed the operation, thus saving their own lives in virtual exercise. What was that part of? That was part of the next stage, which is us going to Mars. And since that time, what we've seen is, and I showed you online there, MakerBot themselves, just in the FDM technology, have launched new material after new material. They can't produce everything themselves, and there are 3D printing material experts. But since that ISS operation, they've been experimenting with regolith. You probably don't know what a regolith is, but you've probably heard it called moon dust. Anything that came down from outer space, and they've been trying to make 3D printers work with regolith, and they've succeeded. So when we go to Mars, we won't be able to take the structures we need to actually stay there and perform operations. And that is exciting, that you are providing 3D printers to businesses which are perhaps just prototyping the parts for more expensive and different technology 3D printers, but it doesn't matter, because 3D printing is that important that it's taken us beyond our own world.
Brilliant. I think that's a really innovative way of thinking, and obviously it worked out brilliant in that case. So thank you ever so much. Please do everybody take note of Paul's details there on screen if you do want to follow up with him after the session, and do encourage that. Thank you ever so much for your time, Paul. I can see you cracking open that beer now. You've earned it, so thank you ever so much. Tom, if you would like to share your screen, and we'll hear now from Tom and Virginia from Page White and Farrer.
as Stephanie mentioned, anniversary of Tech Wednesday, but it's also an anniversary for me because the Tech Wednesday talk that I did that year ago was my first virtual online attempt at a webinar. So have I got any better? I don't know. My hair's got longer. Anyway, this is kind of an extension of that talk because then I spoke about you as the individual and what rights you might create as an individual creator or designer or innovator. So this extends that and just said, if you do want to protect your software, you have got something, where do you start? And you don't start here. You don't start with the core assumption that it's fine. It's all mine. I had an idea. I invented it. I designed it. So I own it. And that's an end of the problem. That's not the right place to start even the thought process. So what we're going to look at this evening, on a little bit of a race against time maybe, is where do you even begin to assess what your rights actually are? And the rights aren't magic. Each individual right that you might have to protect your software arises from a particular legal basis. And I've shown you this diagram here, which sort of categorizes the different types of right that you can end up with. The light blue ones are what we call registered rights. And for those, you have to take some positive affirmative action to do something. And we're going to talk a little bit more today, particularly about patents and where do you start with patents. The dark blue section are rights where you have to do something internally, but you don't have to make an external registration with an external authority. You can just decide that I'd like to have confidential information, or I might have confidential information, and you can take certain internal steps within your company to create that confidential information, and that is also an intellectual property right, and we'll briefly discuss that. And then in the pink sector are rights which are automatically created. You literally don't do anything. You don't even have to think about doing anything. If you create a piece of software, you have copyright. If you create a database, you have database rights. And we're just going to focus a little bit on copyright this evening as an example of that kind of right. So the first step on your journey is to decide what category of right or what rights you might have. And we don't expect you to do that by yourself. That's what we're here for. So the first one, just to talk about a little bit, is copyright, probably the one you're most familiar with if you have anything to do with software, and all those files that Paul was referring to flying back and forth over the internet would no doubt have copyright. It's a very solid right. It is created automatically. But in order for you to assert it, it comes with some serious limitations. It requires copying. So somebody else who comes up with the same idea as you, but didn't copy your software or creation, wouldn't infringe your copyright. So it's okay for people to independently develop their own thing. Even more than that, it only protects the expression of the idea. In this particular case for software, focusing on software, it only protects the code, the actual code. It does not protect the idea behind the code. So if we took the example of Paul's files again on 3D printing files, a particular 3D printing file would be protected by copyright, but somebody else could create a different file to maybe create a similar item in a different way, and that would not be an infringement of copyright. So a competitor can take your overall idea, wouldn't it be nice to have a mask of this shape and a software file to create it, perhaps, and they can just write their own software. So copyright is a limited right. So confidential information, again, a lot of people talk about, well, my software is protected because it's locked down. My software is protected because it's all at the back end. Nobody can see it. It's a trade secret. Confidential information is the basis for these so-called trade secrets. It requires you to maintain a duty of confidence around your software. And very, very importantly, it's not a persistent right. As soon as the knowledge enters the public domain, your confidential information, what started out as a trade secret, is no longer a trade secret, and you can never hark backwards. You can never make your confidential information confidential again once it's gone out there. It doesn't protect against somebody else coming up with the same idea separately, and it doesn't even stop someone else from patenting the same idea, even if you got there first. So if you had confidential information, you maintained it a secret, you did all the right things, but somebody else independently had the idea, they might be the ones that end up with a patent. And we're going to see how crucial that might be in a moment. So what are patents? Well, they're monopoly rights for a start. They don't require copying. They're a registered right, as I explained. You have to apply to one and you get granted one. You get granted this monopoly, which is your exclusive right to do the thing that you have invented. It can protect broad concepts. It's not limited to a particular code or a particular way of doing things. And a very common statement that I hear is, well, you can't patent ideas. And actually, that's true. You can't patent an idea like world peace or something, but you can patent ideas which have a technical expression. So what you can protect are technical features amounting to an idea. And Tom's going to go into that in a little bit more depth in a moment. They can last for up to 20 years. And actually, hearing Paul's comments again about the 3D printing industry, it looks as though some of those patents actually went the full journey. Mostly in the field of software, it's quite likely that you won't need a patent to last for 20 years because it's a very fast-moving field. But it's up to you as the owner to determine how long you want your patent for. It's not a prerequisite that you keep your patent alive for 20 years. A lot of you will have seen patent pending and a number after it, or just patent pending. And that's an indication that a patent has been applied for, an indication that you've taken the first step. And it can be a very effective deterrent in itself, just for other people to know that you have an innovation and that you believe it's a strong enough idea, a technical expression of an idea, to patent. So that's what a patent is in terms of legal structure. What's an actual patent? Well, this is the front page of a patent. It's a document. In the old days, they were paper, and now they're digital. And the front page has a lot of information about who owns the patent, what the patent's about. Patent itself could be 50 pages, could be a very long document. We do that. We write that. That's part of our expertise. If you want a patent relating to your software, we sort all of that out for you. So I think Tom's going to take it up here and just explain what you can patent.
Thanks, Virginia. So as Virginia said, in a sense, you can patent ideas, and actually you can patent stuff while it's still at the idea stage. What you need, the sort of 3 core requirements for something for you to be able to get a patent on something, are that it's new, inventive, and that the thing you're trying to protect is actually something inherently patentable. Now, you'll see that that's a massive cheat, because in answering the question of what can I patent, I've used the word patentable, but I'm going to address that, I promise. But starting with new, because this requirement for new, in one sense, does have just its normal meaning, and in another sense, really doesn't. New is a binary test in law. It's a test of novelty. And the test is, has the thing you're trying to protect been made available to the public? Coming back to what Virginia was talking about in confidential information, what that means is it must not have been disclosed to anyone who's not bound by a duty of confidence. So as long as it satisfies that same confidentiality requirement, then it's new and you can potentially patent it. If someone else has put it into the public domain, and one avenue by which things can enter the public domain is if they're published in other people's patents, but it's not the only one by any means. So you can have technical blogs, social media, increasingly the number of channels there are for information entering the public domain are increasing. And the big one to take away, and if you take away one point from today, this is a good one. The person who puts your idea into the public domain can be you. If you disclose your idea to anyone, or anyone outside of your company, if you're working in a company, anyone at all who's not bound by this duty of confidence, it's no longer new and you can't patent it anymore. So the golden rule there, you can destroy, you can be the one who destroys the novelty of your own invention. It doesn't matter how novel or innovative it was before you put it into the public domain, it's not new anymore. Inventive is the second requirement, and we'll talk a little bit about this later. It's the core requirement that it's not obvious to someone reasonably skilled in the art. Again, you might look at that, and particularly if you work in software, you'll look at stuff that you're doing or other people are doing, and you'll be describing stuff as obvious left, right, and center in our experience. As we'll see in a minute, you have to be a little bit careful with that kind of characterization, because obviousness, similarly to novelty, is not necessarily an intuitive test in the patent world. So this text up here is addressing that third criterion I had on that slide, patentability. This is categories of things that you can and can't patent, irrespective of how novel or inventive they may be. And I've put up here a section from the UK Patents Act, and you'll see it's hereby declared the following things are not inventions. And I've highlighted there mathematical methods, programs for computers, presentation of information. And if you work in software and you're looking at that, you might think, well, why are we bothering to do a webinar on patentability of software? How do you protect your software? That's pretty clear cut. And it would be if it weren't for those two magic words buried at the end there, as such. So you can't protect computer programs as such, or mathematical methods as such. Now, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything. So, but it's come to mean something over the years. It's the wording that went into the statute, and over time, it's had to be given meaning by the courts and patent offices taking some sort of pragmatic views about what this sort of collection of things you can and can't patent really means. And where this is settled is really the idea that if your product or process, whether that's a software product or a computer algorithm, if you're solving a technical problem, then it's no longer software as such. So you're solving a technical problem, you're not software as such, and you're into the realms of patentable stuff, which gives you your three requirements for patentability. If you're solving a technical problem and your solution's new, and that solution is non-obvious within the quite artificial test applied at the Patent Office, then you're eligible for a patent. Briefly mentioned, because it's such a hot topic in recent years, AI and machine learning, can you patent these? And the answer is yes. So artificial intelligence machine learning per se is generally classified, at least at the European Patent Office in the UK, as machine learning, as mathematical methods, sorry. That means the same considerations apply. And if you're into technical applications or technical implementations of AI and machine learning, then yes, you can patent it. Now, when we talk about obvious, what do we mean? So I'll start with what we don't mean. We absolutely don't mean you or your colleague taking a look at what you've come up with after the fact, assessing it and saying, is it obvious? Well, yeah, of course it's obvious. Lots and lots of things are obvious when you've seen how they work. And there's a particular tendency that we've seen in people who are coding, writing software, to have quite a selective memory when it comes to the actual time and effort that it went in to get to a solution, and a high degree of willingness to look at the solution in hindsight and say, well, yeah, it's obvious now. That is not the correct test to apply for obviousness when you're assessing whether or not something is patentable. Firstly, the person to whom it has to be obvious is what's called a person of ordinary skill in the art. And if you've invented something, that is automatically not you. This person of ordinary skill in the art is a hypothetical person with some reasonable skill, but no inventive capability. It's a question of, is it obvious to them? But it's also the question, is it obvious to them without hindsight of what you've invented? It's not taking a look at what you've invented and saying, well, now you've told me what it is it obvious? The test forces you to step back to the point before you had hindsight the invention and say, would it have been obvious to this skilled person to come up with themselves without knowledge of the work you've done? And if you're a software innovator, someone writing code, with the greatest respect, you are the worst person in the world to be assessing obviousness. It's something that does take some skill and expertise to be able to do, and it's a very specific legal test that is even less intuitive, I think, than this requirement of novelty.
So just picking up on that, Tom's talked about, you know, the test of obviousness is a legal test. The test of novelty is a legal test. You know, patents are highly legal things. You do need advice. You know, you do need some help. Even at the early stages of your business, you know, you've got some software. Don't assume it's yours, all yours. You need some assistance to work out what rights are the most appropriate and when to apply for those rights if they do need to be registered. So when should you talk to us? So at an early stage, any early stage is fine. But really what you're looking for as a benchmark is you've solved a technical problem. You've had a look around and there isn't an equivalent solution. There isn't a good way of doing what you did. The solution solves the market need. So you're already kind of pointing towards a marketplace and you need some protection in that marketplace. And that's all we need to kick off a conversation, however early stage you are when you reach those sort of criteria, and then come and talk to us. And do talk to us before you talk to anyone else. Do remember Tom's golden rule that you can destroy the novelty of your own invention. And so don't do that. I'm just looking at the clock and highly conscious that we probably should stop there, but it's a good place to stop. Thanks, Steph.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much. Thank you both for that. Every time I talk about patents and IP, it fills me with fear because I'm like, everyone's just going to steal my ideas. Not that they're worth stealing, but thank you both ever so much. Please do pop your questions in the chat. I know we are a bit up against the time, but I would love to be able to ask those questions to Virginia and Tom if you do have any. We'll just give that a moment. It just means that your information was so great that nobody has any questions for you. I was going to say, I don't know whether you've got an email address that you just want to pop up. I'm sure you'll be more than happy to follow up if we have any questions afterwards.
Yes, the email address that's going up there is fine.
Lovely.
And
okay,
actually, just to add, there weren't any questions. Just to point out that we do offer a free consultation, 30 minutes to an hour at no charge, just to make an initial assessment. So if you're at all nervous about approaching a patent attorney firm, you know, you don't know what to do, you're worried about cost, just give us a ring and we can just start there for free and give you an initial chat.
Great, that's really useful. And I think it's one of those things, it's difficult to probably ask questions in a group setting because everything is so personal to your own idea, isn't it? So really appreciate that for the follow-up offer. Okay then, all I'm going to do is quickly reshare my screen and just follow up on a few things that we have going on locally here in the Midlands. First thing I wanted to bring to your attention is this business esports tournament. So these guys approached me last month and they said, please, can you help us spread the word? If you are a gamer, then please do look into this. The address at the bottom of the screen is there. All of the entry money that, yes, so you pay to enter into the tournament, and the money then goes to charities. So a really nice initiative. Next week, they've got the league fixtures. I'm reading this as if I know what I'm talking about. I don't. A league fixture is happening next week, and then they roll on to knockout stages the following week, and then a final. So yeah, if you are a gamer, please do look into that, speak to your colleagues and see if they're interested. It's all about raising some money for some good causes whilst having fun. So please do look at that. The next thing I wanted to bring to your attention is Code Your Future. We've had Claire here on Tech Wednesday before. She reached out to me to let me know that the West Midlands Code Your Future programme is starting back up in April. So Code Your Future is all about teaching code to people from disadvantaged backgrounds. So whether it's from refugees, asylum seekers, single parents, low-income households, anybody with physical or mental disabilities, Code Your Future is all about getting those people to learn a new skill and hopefully get them into the tech employment and get a new job within that field. They also provide laptops and contributions towards internet access and childcare. So if you fit into that category, or you can think of anybody, please do visit that email at the bottom there. Website, sorry, codeyourfuture.io, or Claire is our West Midlands representative. You can email her, but they do run these up and down the UK. So please do visit the website if you are interested in that. And then the final thing I wanted to talk to you and bring your attention to is Brum Tech Tapas. So I came across this week, signed up to it immediately. So it is a new event series aimed at tech, arts and culture fans within the West Midlands. It's set up and run by a Birmingham tech company, Jump24. They're hoping to bring together like-minded people, hear from local passionate people. The first event is happening next Thursday, and they've got, as you can see on the screen there, a street artist, a Birmingham poet, the founder of Independent Birmingham, and a creative ecosystems researcher. Again, something that our MD, David Hardman, really passionate about, creative ecosystem within the West Midlands. So I've already signed up. I encourage you to too. And yeah, hopefully that's another meetup that we can all get together in person soon. Yeah, brilliant. Raced through those just because I know that people's tummies will start to be rumbling right about now. I can already smell my dinner coming through the waft. So thank you ever so much for joining us this evening. As I say, it's been a whirlwind 12 months, but thank you ever so much for sticking with us throughout that time. And it's been brilliant to have the three speakers here, Tom, Virginia and Paul, this evening. If you'd like to speak at a future Tech Wednesday, please do drop me an email. My email address is on the screen there, stephanie.einan@bruntwood.co.uk, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and we can pencil that in for you. One final thank you to you guys for your knowledge, expertise this evening. Encourage you all to follow up with the three of these after the session. And that will be us for this evening. Hopefully we'll see you next month in April. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.